How do you lose $400 million, shut down a game, a studio, and then follow it all up with another live service controversy and say that these failures are actually a good thing? You don't know, but it's actually a part of the learning process. You know, I wish I made the kind of money that I could lose $400 million and just be like, well, it's the way she goes sometimes. It's been 1 year since the disastrous launch of Concord, the fastest failure in AAA history. And on its anniversary, both Sony and games media have gotten together to reflect, commiserate, and also lie about why the game failed. So it asks the question, did they learn anything? No. Unsurprisingly, no, they didn't. They're blaming it all on marketing because it was a hero shooter and also because the market is just that tough right now. Completely ignoring all the criticisms of the players, all the complaints that they had, because they aren't the opinions that they want to hear. Those opinions make them feel uncomfortable, and it's better off just to pretend that that's just a vocal minority. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about the fastest failure in AAA gaming history. I want to talk about Sony's comments on the disaster and the growing divide between the perception of games media, the industry, and the players. You know, if it was a vocal minority, wouldn't have more copies sold? Looking back, I don't think anybody realizes just how absurd and embarrassing of a failure Concord really was. I mean, we're talking about a game that was in development for over 8 years, racked up more than $400 million in costs, and a year after launch, Sony was so confident in the game and in the studio that they bought the studio on the spot, a team that nobody had ever heard of, and a game that we had never heard of. And when it finally released, it sold 25,000 copies. That's it. There are indie games that you guys have never even heard of that have sold better than that. The reception of the game was so bad that at one point it was the highest trending discussion on social media while simultaneously dying at retail. I have never seen something that has been so widely discussed yet never bought. Sony pulled the plug just after 12 days, and then less than a year after them buying Firewalk, they shut the entire studio down. They basically bought a car and they just totaled it after pulling it out of the dealership. And when you make that kind of mistake, when you fail to understand your audience to that scale, it demands answers. But Sony's response and the industry's response has been terrible. Just this past June, PlayStation boss Herman Hulse doubled down on their live service strategy. He said that he doesn't believe that Bungie's upcoming marathon will suffer the same fate despite all of the controversy around its closed alpha and its stolen assets. There is no way that that game is living down the name Art Raiders. He also had added, saying that we remain very, very committed to building a diverse and resilient live service portfolio. We have MLB The Show, Destiny 2, Helldivers 2. Those are good examples of the type of titles we're looking to develop. As for Concord's failure, Hulse blamed market conditions, saying that ultimately that title entered into a hyper-competitive section of the market. I think it was insufficiently differentiated to resonate with players. Ah, yes, the market was too crowded. The game was just not different enough, as if no game could possibly survive under such cruel and unfair constraints. Right? But of course, the cope does not end there, because following the 1-year anniversary of Concord's failure, Herman Hulse has commented further in an article from Games Radar Plus written by Scott McCree titled "Architect of Sony's Disastrous Live Service Push" says, failures are good actually, because now there's more rigorous and more frequent testing. They write, PlayStation boss Herman Hulse said that the live service failures are good for the development of future attempts. One of Sony's first major pushes into the live service space was Concord, and for those of you who managed to miss out on the fiasco, it was pulled offline after 2 weeks of being out, and not long after, Sony killed the studio behind it, meaning that 8 years of development were basically for nothing. Concord was not a bad game. It was a well-made game and relatively bug-free, but various factors, bad marketing, a paid title in a genre full of free ones, and a bit generic, led it to be a disaster that makes the original Cyberpunk 2077 launch look tame. And yet, PlayStation are unfazed with the development of live service titles going forward. Marathon is the next in line, and from the sound of things, it isn't going swimmingly over there either. Sony Interactive Entertainment CEO Herman Hulse spoke to the Financial Times about Concord's failure and Sony's continued push into live service despite it. Hulse says that the fiasco has led Sony to put in place much more rigorous and more frequent testing, he adds, saying that the advantage of every failure is that now people understand how necessary oversight is. Hulse also added, I don't want teams to play it safe, but I would like us, when we fail, to fail early and cheaply. So let me get this straight. They're calling this a cheap and early failure. 8 years, $400 million lost, 25,000 copies sold that they later ended up having to return because the game was dead in 12 days. The studio gone inside of the same year that you guys purchased it. If that's cheap and early, I would love to know what Sony considers is expensive. because this was not a quick test. This was a car crash in slow motion, a disaster that everybody saw coming from the initial reveal trailer. And how do you guys still manage to plow into that head first? How did it not dawn on you at any point in 8 years just to make this game known to the public? How do you brush off its failure like it's nothing? I just don't get it, man. Hall says that they're learning from this, but what about the other lessons that don't involve Concord? Since their live service push began, they announced around like 15 different projects. More than half of those games have either failed or been canceled. Concord, Destruction All-Stars, Foam Stars, all dead or circling the drain. They axed the Last of Us multiplayer, Twisted Metal, Spider-Man The Great Web, Bungie's Payback, and the God of War live service project, plus 3 other ones that we never even saw. 11 games gone. What's left? Fair Games and Bungie's Marathon. Both of those games have the same trajectory as Concord, at least in my eyes. Both of them are either headed for cancellation or market failure. And yet we're supposed to believe that this is all a part of some healthy learning process? I guess you could chalk up one of these losses as a lesson learned, a stumble to make the next game better, but Sony isn't learning. At this point, with 11 cancellations and failures, I don't think it's a far-fetched idea to think that these guys have blown over $1 billion on a live service gamble. And sure, Helldivers 2 might be a breakout success, but one win does not erase the wreckage. That's 11 road signs that are telling you to merge back into your lane, and you just keep blowing right past them. But then again, what should I expect from the same guy who gaslit himself into believing that Concord was going to be Sony's Star Wars? This conversation would be entirely different if Sony had a track record here, if they had a catalog of live service hits to be able to point to, but they don't. Outside of Gran Turismo and MLB The Show, 2 of their longest running staples, the only success story they have is Helldivers 2, and even that was a gamble that they never expected to succeed. I mean, I would mention Destiny 2 here, but that game's a disaster now. Everything else has collapsed. How do you not look at that? Double down on what you're good at, premium single-player games, and just admit that this whole experiment was a disaster. I don't think it's controversial to say that Sony's first-party single-player games are some of the best in the industry. Not all of them hit, but the vast majority of them do deliver, and regardless of my own personal opinions on them, the track record speaks for itself. Astrobot stole Game of the Year last year, Spider-Man continues to print money, God of War Ragnarok was one of their fastest-selling titles before Helldivers 2, Horizon Forbidden West is one of the top sellers in 2022, The Last of Us continues to make cash every time they remake it, Ghost of Tsushima is widely celebrated, and even Ghost of Yotei, despite all the criticism, has people at least cautiously optimistic. I don't love everything that they put out, but there's no denying that Sony has built their reputation on premium single-player experiences, and that's why this whole obsession with live service games is so maddening to me, because they have lost staggering amounts of money chasing this model while it isn't working, while redirecting all of their talent and resources from what people actually want, new IP or the return of old IP that fans have been begging for. And that just makes me even more mad because Sony didn't just stumble into Concord. It saw it in development. It wrote the check. They bought the studio. They looked at that game and said, this is the future of PlayStation. And cost here isn't just financial. Every single team that is pulled off of a new IP, every dollar that's funneled into this failed portfolio, every opportunity smothered in the name of live service, it all adds up. It's not just the wasted money. It's that they've wasted time, talent, and trust, the trust of their players, all to chase a model that their audience never asked for. How does that make you feel as a customer? The money that you spent, the money that you've invested in their games, in their platform, in their hardware, isn't being used to make better games for you, isn't even being used to make the games that you want. Instead, it's being used to make the vision that they want PlayStation to be. I wish that these companies would treat their customers as well as they do their shareholders. If that was the case, PlayStation would look like how we want it to. And I'll be honest with you, I feel like that would be a lot more profitable than what they have been doing. Now, I said this not too long ago in another video, but these companies, they all have a customer base that literally tells them what they want to buy. And with the resources they have, with the talent they have, they could easily deliver on what players are asking for, but they don't. Instead, they go out and they do what you're not asking for, and then they wonder why they fail. We're using this as a lesson learned. Yeah, sure. I totally believe that coming from the guy that saw Concord in development and said, we need to buy this studio right now because this is going to be our Star Wars. A game that's entire model was built off of the idea of having these knockoff Guardians of the Galaxy seasonal movies every time a new season comes out for the game. How delusional do you have to be to believe that that could ever find success? But that's the debate. That's the entire thing around Concord. It's why it failed. And even in this article that I just read and the CEO's comments, whether it's journalist or CEO, the reasons that they give, the failure, how they're chalking it up, just doesn't make any sense. And that is just driving me absolutely insane, because the way the industry explains these problems is nothing like what the players are actually experiencing. I just can't take it seriously anymore when these companies claim that they're learning from failure, because if you actually listen to what these guys are saying, it never matches up with what players are actually complaining about. Not a single time. Every single time one of these games collapses, it's the same script that keeps getting rolled out. Publishers blame the market or timing or competition. The media nods along like it's gospel. Meanwhile, the rest of us are screaming about real issues: uninspired design, broken priorities, character designs that are just not connecting with anybody. And it's like we're not even in the room with these guys. It feels less like an industry that's trying to learn something and more like a monolith that's just rehearsing excuses, a chorus of publishers and journalists singing the exact same tune, while the people who actually buy and play these games are sitting here wondering how many more billions need to be set on fire before somebody listens. In fact, an article from last year proves my case perfectly, because IGN admitted it themselves when they wrote an article titled, "Concord is estimated to have sold 25,000 units. Here's why analysts think it failed." In a section of the article, they write, "Why isn't Concord selling? Usually when I reach out to analysts for a comment on a piece like this, they largely have similar assessments of the bigger picture, but can offer differing perspectives on certain details. In the case of Concord, everyone I spoke to agreed on the same reasons it had failed. Concord suffered from poor marketing, a high price point, and most critically, a lack of differentiation in an oversaturated genre." First, these guys go on to blame the marketing, saying that Concord suffered from low awareness and purchase intent, and that before the game's launch, only a tiny percentage of players even knew that it existed. Retail promotion was basically just a handful of web placements, and because it was a new IP, they claimed that it lacked pre-existing fan bases to bolster its launch. Do I really need to sit here and name literally every single indie banger that's dropped? All of them with no marketing, all of them were new IP, and all of them lacked any pre-existing fan bases? They then moved on to the price, saying that at $40, Concord was too expensive next to free-to-play competitors. They argued that players only shift if all of their friends do, and they even hesitate because they have sunk cost fallacy with cosmetics and perks that they've already bought into in other games. They, of course, then go on to talk about how the hero shooter genre was just too oversaturated at the time, saying that since then, we've seen a few more big-budget hero shooters come to the market: Apex Legends, Valorant, and Overwatch 2, each of them with their own unique gameplay attributes that Harding roles. All three of these games are played by millions of gamers every month and dominate this category. Concord's gunplay compares most closely to Overwatch 2, and overall the hero shooter market is already well served with a collection of very strong free-to-play titles. They then finished off by pointing out the timing of the game's release, saying that it doesn't help that Concord released on August 23rd, 2024, just 3 days after Black Myth Wukong. Though the two games are significantly different, it's hard to deny that the launch of the former overshadowed the latter in terms of marketing, hype, and sales. For what it's worth, Concord's release date was announced 5 months after Black Myth Wukong. For one reason or another, Sony did not opt to nudge the game out of its wake. Now, one thing I want to point out before I move on from this, they linked Black Myth Wukong on this, and of course it links to their article about the claims of sexism. Now, the only thing that I'll give these guys is the pricing. Charging $40 in a genre that's built on free-to-play is one of the dumbest decisions that you can make. But the idea that more marketing would have saved Concord, what are you guys saying? And the excuse that the hero shooter space is already well served? Please, Marvel Rivals came out right after Concord a few months later, and it peaked at almost 650,000 concurrent players on Steam. It hit 40 million total players in 2 months, and even after all the initial hype died down, well, it still averages over 100,000 players per day. Clearly, the genre was never the problem. Universally, players were saying the exact same thing. It might have contributed, but it was never the core reason. Even if Concord would have been free to play, it wouldn't have mattered. The only difference that would have made is the people dunking on it, including myself, would have had more gameplay footage to be able to use. But no amount of trailers, media push, no billboard campaign is going to make anyone buy something that they don't want. No marketing would have done anything. The only thing it would have done is just burn more money. And then there's the wildest excuse of all, that Black Myth Wukong overshadowed Concord. Sure, Wukong dominated hype and sales, but maybe the question should be instead, why did it have all that hype to begin with? Maybe it's because it was a fresh IP, a high-quality game, and it actually looked cool. That's the biggest reason why that game actually moved. Maybe it's because it was actually directly aimed at the people who play dark action RPGs. And that's the part this industry just does not seem willing to admit, that gaming overall might be split 50-50 between men and women, but once you break it down by genre, those numbers start to skew. Dark action RPGs like Black Myth Wukong, that's overwhelmingly male. Competitive shooters, overwhelmingly male. Concord's biggest problem wasn't the competition or the timing or the marketing, it was just that it didn't speak to its core demographic. It didn't cater to the people who actually play these games. You know, last year, Paul Tossi wrote an article titled The Woke War and Why the Right Believes It's Dominating Gaming and TV in 2024, where he had lined up every supposed win and loss in the culture war and applied the same tried and true industry excuses that we've heard 100 times. When it came to Concord, he said the wrong perception was that it failed because its heroes were not attractive enough or because the game was virtue signaling with pronouns in the character select screen. I hate to break it to you, man, but that's exactly why this game failed, and that's also why a lot of other games have failed as well. Sure, some of these criticisms are going to be hyperbolic, but at its core, players did not connect with the aesthetics, the tone, or the designs. Politics have nothing to do with it. The only reason that you don't want to hear that is because it's coming from people that you see as your political opposition, but that doesn't make it any less true. The fact of the matter is, these games keep leaning into themes and aesthetics that players do not care about. And yes, it is virtue signaling when you're elevating things that are not social norms above the quality of the experience and who that experience is supposed to be for. I mean, maybe I'm seeing this from the wrong perspective, but I think it's as simple as people do not care about these things that these developers are shoving into their games. It's not for them and they don't want it. You can try to gaslight them and say, well, if you don't care and it's not for you, then why does it matter? Well, it does matter because they're buying it. It's like that supposedly controversial clip of Snoop Dogg. He did not sign up to teach his little kid grandson about gender identity. He came to watch a movie cartoon about toys. And instead of just listening or acknowledging that, journalists are ignoring it, developers are digging trenches, and suddenly there are political battle lines all over the video games industry. And I just don't even see this as a political issue. I just see it as a taste issue. And, case in point, one of the Concord developers responded online to criticism about the game, saying that, I don't really care. It was a huge labor from a lot of insanely talented people making an awesome game. Why would I care about a bunch of talentless freaks hating on it? Well, here's the reason you should care. Because those talentless freaks are the ones that are buying your games. They are the ones that keep you employed. When you dismiss them, don't act surprised when your game tanks in less than 2 weeks and you don't have a job. I mean, this is comical at this point because on one hand, you have developers that are calling players talentless freaks. You have journalists that are ignoring the elephant in the room. And on the other hand, you have these same people that are begging you for sympathy. I'm reminded just a few months back after the disaster around Marathon's closed alpha, one of Concord's developers took to Reddit to post this long post telling players that they need to be empathetic, that we need to give more grace to developers that are making mistakes. And it's a line that we have heard 1,000 times by now. They said that Concord failed to resonate with players and it was a gut-wrenching experience for them and that players need to go easy on the Marathon team. And the crazy thing is, the only thing that I never hear is an honest acknowledgement of player criticism, not a single time, not in good faith, never the quiet part out loud that maybe the problem isn't the market or the competition or the timing, maybe the problem with games is themselves. These failures are not mysteries. They're not accidents of timing. They are not lessons in disguise. They are the result of the industry refusing to listen, hiding behind excuses about markets and competition while ignoring the players that are actually keeping this industry alive. Concord was not some anomaly. It was the clearest possible warning, and yet instead of just changing course, the whole lot of them are still marching down the exact same path, convinced that the problem is anything but themselves, which means that the next collapse is not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. I legit think that the only developers that I know that have talked about these things, either in good faith or honestly or just up front, have been like Lords of the Fallen CEO and a handful of Eastern developers, and that's it. And I don't understand why it's become so taboo just to have the honest discussion of, hey, with certain target audiences, with certain genres and certain games, this stuff isn't working. It's not resonating with them. They're not interested in it. And by forcing it, we're just going to lose more and more money. We're going to lose those customers, and we're just going to continue to piss them off. Maybe these guys just like hot characters. Isn't that crazy? I think regardless of male or female, people do like attractive characters. That doesn't mean they need to be in every single game, but I mean, look at Marvel Rivals. Regardless of how that game is done up until this point, obviously it's lost some people ever since it came out. I think that happens with a lot of these games, to be honest. There's some edge cases that hold on to a lot of their players, but I mean, some of these absurd numbers, we can't expect these games to hold on to 600,000 concurrent players. No, it's just not going to happen. But you still see a lot of fan art. You still see people cosplaying the characters all the time, even still today. And I think you just need to not be in the middle. You can also lean to the other side, make characters look weird and ugly. Look at Oddworld, Munch's Odyssey. Look at Earthworm Jim. What happened to those games? Look at Roadhog or Junkrat or characters like that. People like stuff like that. It's interesting. I think it's when these developers try to do these relatable character designs where they're trying to bend themselves to be able to... it's virtue signaling. I'm just going to call it out for what it is. It's exactly what it is. But people don't want that. They're just not interested in it. We know what average looks like. We look at it in the mirror every single day. I don't need to see that in a video game. I want to see something weird. I want to see something cool. I want to see something inspiring. And by not admitting that to yourself, you're going to put yourself in a world of pain. And that's what a lot of these companies have done. You know, the industry has to wake up to this. They have to just talk about the elephant in the room and be open and honest about it. Otherwise, it's just going to sink more and more of these games. And I think that's the reason why, in a lot of cases, I try not to be too pessimistic when it comes to some of these games and these companies. But it's really hard to, because they just refuse to approach it because it makes them so uncomfortable. I think on one hand, they're afraid of PR, but on the other hand, these guys do believe in a lot of this stuff. And I hate to tell you, when you're selling a product, it doesn't matter how you feel. Unless you're okay with not selling it to a lot of people, but then you need to prepare for that. I sure as the hell wouldn't be spending $400 million to make something and then be surprised when you lose money on it. It makes them uncomfortable. Well, that's too bad because we're the ones with the money. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did enjoy the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video with your friends, follow me on Twitch, follow me on Twitter, and catch me live on Fridays. Thank you guys for watching. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. Catch you in the next one.